Good afternoon and welcome to the Midday News. Here's what we have in the bulletin. 31 new COVID-related deaths in Jamaica. Calls for government to put plans in place to address overcrowding at vaccination sites. And later in sports, Reggae Boy squad cleared after all members returned negative COVID results ahead of Mexico game. I'm Anthony Lugg. Here are the details. We begin with news that COVID-19 has claimed 31 lives in Jamaica, pushing the death toll to 1,549. The deaths were recorded between August 23 and 30. Majority of the victims are citizens over 50 years old. A 23-year-old woman from Westmoreland is among the latest deaths. The country also recorded 351 new cases from a batch of 1,099 tests done within the last 24 hours. The positivity rate is now 40.6%. The total case count is 68,482. Of that, 18,103 are active. 712 people have been admitted with the respiratory virus, 40 are critically ill, 94 are severely ill, and 196 moderately ill. Calls this afternoon for the government to put plans in place to address overcrowding and long lines at vaccination sites across the island. But as you hear in this report from Fisherman, the Ministry of Health says changes will be made to the process going forward. The issue was discussed on the morning agenda on Power 106 FM.
The race against time to get the vaccine into the arms of as many people as possible so that the country can move closer to herd immunity. But all has not been smooth sailing. There were chaotic scenes at the National Arena on Monday when hundreds of Jamaicans who turned up at the facility to take the jab were sent elsewhere due to overcrowding. Professor of Public Health Dr. Winston Davidson is now pressing the government to put measures in place to improve the vaccination plan.
But the problem is a logistical problem. It is slackness, and it ought to be dealt with. And if they can't do it, then put somebody else to do it.
There are also calls for the government to remove the logistical aspect of the vaccination process from the Ministry of Health so the ministry can focus on getting the jab into the arms of Jamaicans. Public commentator Dennis Chung is of a different view. He believes better management is what's needed.
The vaccination site was supposed to be opened at 9 o'clock.
Yes.
And it didn't open until 10 o'clock. So already,
there's a problem right there.
A long line was there, right? So the expectation that you have, and the reason why it never opened was not because of the nurses who are manning the thing, because they were very professional, right? But the vaccine never reached to the site on time.
Director of Family Services at the Ministry of Health, Dr. Melody Ennis, says that the chaos on Monday was a behavioral issue. She's calling for the public to partner with the Ministry of Health to improve the matter.
But the population has got to work with us. They have got to be disciplined. Why is it we cannot stand in a line 6 feet apart without the police or soldiers being there? Why can't we do that on our own?
Dr. Ennis says the ministry will be taking a different approach in a bid to address the problem going forward.
We have instructed that they should have 2 separate areas. You have an area for persons with appointments, and you have an area for persons who are walk-ins.
Over 13,000 Jamaicans were vaccinated on Monday. Vashon Brown, TVJ News.
And another coronavirus variant is now on the radar of the World Health Organization. Shamela Pullen reports.
Mu or B1621 was first detected in Colombia in January. On Monday, the World Health Organization WHO described it was a variant of interest. The WHO considers it worthy of special monitoring, but it's viewed the variant as less of a potential problem. This is when compared to the Delta or Alpha strains. The WHO's epidemiology report says that preliminary data showed Mu appeared to be more resistant to antibodies. The WHO says preliminary data showed the variant has the same behavior as the Beta variant, but this needs to be confirmed by further studies. The international agency said the prevalence of this variant has declined globally, but it recorded that samples with the Mu variant is consistently increasing in Colombia and Ecuador. Mu is the fifth variant of interest to be listed by the WHO as a variant of interest, and there are also 4 more serious variants of concern. Shamela Pullen, TVJ News.
Opposition leader Mark Golding is making several recommendations to the government as the country continues to battle the third wave of the coronavirus pandemic. Among other things, Mr. Golding says it is time to put measures in place to ensure the country does not run short on oxygen again. He was speaking during a national broadcast last evening. O'Shane Masters has more.
The opposition leader said he was making his address at a perilous and frightening time for the nation. More and more people are rushing to hospitals due to COVID-19, and for Mr. Golding, the health sector has reached a breaking point. He lashed the government for not putting in place what he called proper arrangements to ensure the country had adequate supply of medical oxygen for the spike. And so the opposition is making this recommendation.
A high-level public-private sector committee should be tasked with the governance of the procurement of oxygen supplies and the logistics of oxygen delivery, with a clear mandate to plan ahead to ensure that we never run short of oxygen in our hospitals. Oxygen generators should be brought into Jamaica on an emergency basis to avoid shortages of this critical life sustainer.
Oxygen generators, he says, will reduce the reliance on bulk oxygen and cylinders provided by the single local supplier. As for the country's current quarantine rules,
the quarantine rules are not being properly monitored for compliance. COVID testing upon arrival and follow-up by the public health system should be rigorously enforced. With our healthcare system under stress, it is time to insist that all visitors to our shores are vaccinated. We have to protect our people and our country as we fight to get out of this crisis.
And as the country continues to fight against COVID-19, the opposition leader argues that unity is lacking.
The Disaster Risk Management Act has been used by the government to set the rules for the pandemic, but its main governance tool, the broad-based National Disaster Risk Management Council, has been abandoned. That council has not had a single meeting since I became leader of the opposition last year, November. The council should be bringing together both political leaders as well as experts from the public and private sectors to provide broad guidance and promote unity of purpose in confronting this disaster.
In the meantime, Mr. Golding is also recommending that each parish set up a dedicated facility to look after healthcare workers if they fall ill while serving on the front lines of the pandemic. O'Shane Masters, TVJ News.
And it's time now for a break. Stay with us. More stories when we return. Welcome back to the Midday News. Thanks for staying with us. Fishermen in Port Maria, St. Mary are asking for help following losses of their fish pots and other fishing supplies after the passage of Tropical Storm Ida. Cody and Barrett reports.
The media them don't know nothing about it. Right, this thing just come and it could have killed the whole of Jamaica.
Tropical Storm Ida caught fishermen on the Port Maria beach by surprise. Many said they had no time to secure or save any of their fishing supplies.
We have 15 fish pots and we lost around 8 of them out there, so you don't know how it go. Rough out there. Can't do nothing about it. No money now make. Nothing now go on. So we have to just, if we can get little help on here, we gotta give thanks for that.
Well, I lost about 7 pots now still, you know. Yeah, man, I lost 7 pots still. But if there's something there for me still, I saw it go still, you know. But if there's nothing, we have to carry on.
Most of the fish pot ain't gone, you know. See, as I can see it, we just repair that one, and it alone is fine so far. So we have some more fish underneath the sea bottom there, so we don't never can find them back. So we have a big loss now, and we don't really get nothing when them things are going, as special people get.
That raised another concern. One of the fishermen made this appeal to the Minister of Agriculture, Floyd Green.
Please, Mr. Green, whenever time you just sit with that, say, when you're giving person this voucher, the person them need it. They not, and somebody give it, you go sell it. And I want, need somebody who will feed them family. This is about the family thing, you know.
In the meantime, they highlighted what they needed the most.
One pot right now about $5,000, about 6,000, but with all stick though. Yeah, with all the stick. What's the roll of wire now? One roll of wire for the 4 feet. It's about maybe about $15,000 or $16,000.
Well, if I want two roll of wire or even one, I would be glad to get something still from them. You see it? That's the thing. So we don't really look no big shares out of them. If I want two around one roll, we survive after that for a while so till we can replace back with regular amount.
Codian Barrett, TVJ News.
Her concerns are valid. The public defender has taken an interest in the impasse between one of the occupants of the boyhood home of Marcus Garvey and the government. Colleen Johnson is concerned that the property has been undervalued, but the culture minister says the government has been bending over backwards to facilitate the owners. Giovanni Dennis has been tracking the story.
We believe that there is good merit in the concerns of this citizen.
Public Defender Arlene Harrison Henry on why her office has taken an interest in concerns raised by one of 3 occupants of Marcus Garvey's boyhood home in St. Anne. In a TVJ News interview last week, Colleen Johnson said she was dissatisfied with the government's valuation of the property. Mrs. Harrison Henry says the concern is valid.
The first valuation that was done in 2009, there was a value of the property of $3.2 million. The award of $3.2 million was made in 2017, years after the valuation was done. We are of the view that the Marcus Garvey boyhood home has cultural, historical, architectural, heritage value that has to be reflected in that which is offered to Ms. Johnson.
And so, she wants the valuation to better consider the intrinsic historical and cultural value of the property. She also wants better dialogue.
I believe that there is room for negotiations, and we have certainly started to look at how we can find a resolution to this problem.
In the meantime, she insists Ms. Johnson's contention is that there was an oversight and she's not trying to be difficult.
It is not the case that Ms. Johnson is not prepared to leave. It appears to us that the heritage value has not been adequately reflected in the purchase price and in the award made by the Commission of Land.
The plan is to develop the property into a museum in honor of Jamaica's first national hero, Marcus Garvey. The government has constructed 2 housing units for the other 2 sisters, but wants the issue with Colleen Johnson resolved before any handover. Giovanni Dennis, TVJ News.
And here's a preview of what's coming up in this evening's health report.
In this evening's health report, we look at COVID-19 and nutrition.
So you should try to avoid consuming foods that are high in sugar, high in fats, and also try to ensure that a lot of persons drink a lot of sugar-sweetened beverages like soda and juices that are high in sugar. So you try to avoid those foods. And especially for persons who may be diabetic or persons who are hypertensive, you try to ensure that you eat foods that will not spike your blood sugar for those who may be diabetic.
That's the health report in Primetime News at 7. And now for today's healthy living tip. Keep up fruit and vegetable intake. Build up a stock of healthy snacks. Limit highly processed foods. And make cooking and eating a fun and meaningful part of your family routine.
And it's time now for the Business Minute. Here's Cody and Barrett.
In business news, the bid submission deadline for Phase 1 of the Greater Bernard Large Development Project has been extended to September 14. The administrators of the Greater Bernard Large Development Master Plan have invited qualified developers to participate in a competitive divestment process for land within the development area. Housing and agriculture will be equally prioritized, with up to 16,000 housing solutions programmed for construction and 1,300 acres of land reserved for small and medium-sized farmers. The Greater Bernard Large Development Master Plan spans a total of 5,397 acres. In business internationally, India's economy rebounded at a record rate in the 3 months to the end of June, even as a devastating second wave of COVID-19 hit the country. Looser pandemic curves allowed for more economic economic activity compared to the country's first nationwide lockdown in 2020. Gross domestic product GDP grew by 20.1% for the April to June quarter compared to a year earlier. During the same period last year, India's economy shrank by 24%. And that's it for the Business Minute. I'm Cody Ann Barrett.
It's time now for a look at some of the top regional and international stories.
In news from the region, health authorities in Grenada have warned that the pandemic situation in the country has become dire. They are appealing for the population to get vaccinated to curb the spread of the virus that has now resulted in the country having 267 active cases, including a 5-month-old baby. Grenada has a population of just over 100,000. And on the international scene, millions of Gulf Coast residents who survived Ida's devastating winds and deluge of rain face a new danger: widespread power outages that are expected to last for weeks, coupled with a period of excessive heat. Ida, which made landfall Sunday as a Category 4 hurricane, has already contributed to 5 deaths. Hundreds of people have been rescued, but search and rescue crews haven't been able to access some of the hardest hit areas, so it's not yet clear how many residents might still be trapped by flooding or debris. Officials say electricity might not be restored to some areas for a month, which could prove life-threatening as intense heat moves into the region. 3 people are now dead after a gang of armed robbers in Brazil carried out a series of bank heists using human shields strapped to their getaway cars on Monday. The attackers targeted banks in the small city of Aracatuba in the southeastern state of Sao Paulo early Monday. In a bid to distract law enforcement, the robbers positioned bombs all over the city. According to authorities, one man was seriously injured when the devices were detonated, losing both his feet. During the confusion, the heavily armed robbers held up 3 banks, taking hostages in the process. The hostages were then tied to the roofs and hoods of 10 cars to act as human shields. Of the 3 persons who died, 2 of them victims and 1 a suspected robber. 5 others were injured and 2 suspects were apprehended and sent to jail. And that's it for your regional and international roundup. I'm Cody Ann Barrett.
And we head now to a quick break. When we return, we'll have your midday sports report. Renata Brown is standing by. Mr. Brown, you're very late as usual.
Welcome back. It's now time for your Midday Sports. I'm Renata Brown. Now, all members of the delegation returned negative COVID-19 results. That's the Reggae Boys. And Kemar Taxi Lawrence, who's the defender, is urging his teammates to put their best foot forward as they get ready to face Mexico in their opening game of the CONCACAF World Cup qualifiers on Thursday at the Azteca Stadium. Lawrence, along with other members of the squad, are now in Mexico after departing the island on Tuesday. However, with a number of UK-based players missing due to Mexico being on their travel red list, Lawrence says this trip gives players the opportunity to show their value to the team.
People have to step up, people have to be ready, and this is the opportunity, some other persons are going to get, to prove themselves. So, next man up. We know the football thing go. Next man up. Guys can't play right now, so the next man have to be ready, to come in and do the work and perform.
And the Reggae Boys will have their first training session this evening at 6. The Jamaica Tallows moved to second in the Caribbean Premier League table after a career-best score from Kennard Lewis led them to a 6-wicket win over the Barbados Royals last evening at Warner Park in St. Kitts. Lewis hit 9 fours and 5 sixes on his way to 89, the highest individual score in the tournament so far. He got support from Shamar Brooks, who made 47, as the two shared in a 93-run 4th-wicket partnership to take the Jamaican franchise the victory at 155 for 4. Former West Indies under-19 bowler Joshua Bishop picked up the first 3 Tallows wickets to end with 3 for 20. Earlier, Miguel Pretorius bagged 4 for 45, while Fidel Edwards had 2 for 32 in helping to restrict the Royals to 151 for 8. Azam Khan top scored with 50, while Glenn Phillips made 31. The Tallows will be back in action this evening against the St. Kitts and Nevis Patriots, and that game starts at 6 p.m. Bangladesh recorded their first win over New Zealand in 2020 internationals following a comprehensive 7-wicket victory in a low-scoring affair in Dhaka earlier today. Following up from last month's 4-1 series win over Australia, Bangladesh dismissed New Zealand for just 60 runs, their lowest ever total in T20 internationals. Mustafizur Rahman claimed 3 for 13, while Nasum Ahmed, Shakib Al Hassan and Mohamed Saifuddin all had 2 apiece. Tom Latham and Henry Nichols were the only New Zealand batsmen to reach double figures with 18 each. Now, in their run chase, Bangladesh achieved a victory at 62 for 3, despite being 2 for 7 at one stage. Shakib led the way with 25. Game 2 of the 5-match series will be played on Friday. And finally, Jamaican athletes could return to Australia for the Commonwealth Games for the second time in the last 3 stagings, as Inside the Games is reporting that Commonwealth Games Australia, the CGA, has refused to rule out a possible New South Wales bid to host the 2026 edition, which is currently without a host city. According to the report, CGA said it has ambitions to host future Commonwealth Games, including potentially 2026, and is in discussions with numerous state governments about hosting opportunities. It had recently been reported by The Australian that CGA was in talks with the NSW, that's New South Wales government, over hosting the 2026 Commonwealth Games. And that's it for your Midday Sports. It's back to you, Anthony.
All right, thank you very much, Bernardo. And before we go, Prime Minister Andrew Holness has called a press conference for 6 o'clock this evening. It coincides with the continued rise in COVID-19 cases and deaths and criticism about the management of the crisis. And that's where we leave you today. That's the Midday News. I'm Anthony Lugg. Join us at 7 for Primetime News. On behalf of the news, sports, and production teams, good afternoon.